I do want to kick off asking you about your reaction to this news from Buckingham Palace last night that Andrew is having his titles stripped, including that of Prince, and that he'll move out of Royal Lodge in Windsor. Is that a move that you welcome?
Well, listen, this is a decision, of course, for the King, and a very difficult decision it must have been. But yes, of course, we support him in his decision. Big fan of the royal family, and this is an unwelcome series of events for the King. But I think it probably had to come to this, and so yes, I think he's made the right decision. And I think the problem for Prince Andrew is of course his relationship with Epstein, but also the changing nature of his story regarding that relationship and the further investigations that will no doubt take place in terms of what's happened.
Yeah, and given that, should this have happened sooner, do you think?
Well, you can always say that. Again, that's a decision for the King. I'm not going to criticise his decision. But I think increasingly we saw recent news on this particular story. Again, the position had changed in recent weeks. And I think the King's taken a very difficult decision, and we support him in that decision.
This stripping of titles won't need an Act of Parliament. This will involve the Lord Chancellor getting involved. The King will send royal warrants to the Lord Chancellor. That means it won't get scrutiny in Parliament. Do you think that's something to be regretted?
Well, all things can be scrutinised in Parliament. They can't just necessarily be changed. This is a matter for the royal family. It can be debated in Parliament, and it may well be debated again. But I think, listen, I think the process is clear. The King's made a difficult decision with his own brother. That must have been difficult for the whole family. And I think now is probably the wrong time to speculate in terms of any changes we need to make. I'd rather do those things in the cold light of day.
Do you think that Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, as we should now call him, should go to the US to answer any questions there might be about Jeffrey Epstein if he's called to?
I think any of us have a responsibility to cooperate with any investigation. I think that would be my advice.
So in other words, yes, you think he should go if it's requested?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Let's move on to the issue of Rachel Reeves, of the Chancellor now. Yesterday, your leader, Kemi Badenoch, called for an investigation into this news that she hadn't got a special licence when she rented out her house in London when she moved into number 11. Since then, we have seen correspondence emerge in which the letting agent has acknowledged that it was their fault that the licence hadn't been applied for because they had told the family that they would do that. Are you satisfied now that she's done nothing wrong?
Well, there's a key missing piece in that series of events you've just outlined, is that Rachel Reeves' story has changed. On Wednesday, she said she wasn't aware that a selective licence was required. It cost £900, and everybody else has to pay them if you rent the property in those areas. She's campaigned for selective licences in other parts of the country, including her constituency in Leeds. This property was in Dulwich in South London. She said she wasn't aware. Then it turns out her story changed, and on the basis some information came to light which shows she was made aware, and her husband was in dialogue with the agent about getting one, and that never happened. So what we're calling for, and I think what Kemi Badenoch was calling for, is absolutely right, a full investigation, and that's within the Prime Minister's gift to show some backbone and make sure these events are properly investigated. And if it turns out it's an innocent mistake, of course, that's not a resigning matter, but if it's more serious than that, then it potentially is. I think the big problem here for Rachel Reeves, of course, is if we want a strong economy, which we want, we need a decent budget in November the 26th, which she has a responsibility to implement, to put in place and implement. And we're very worried this is another distraction. And we're also very worried that she's going to come back again to the country, breaking more manifesto promises and stick up taxes. That's what she's going to do. We believe if she does that, she should resign.
Does it need to be a further distraction? The Prime Minister's ethics advisor, Sir Laurie Magnus, has said that it was an unfortunate but inadvertent error. And he said, having seen all these latest emails and everything too that emerged yesterday, he said he found no evidence of bad faith.
Well, he also said it was regrettable that Rachel Reeves didn't provide all the information in the first place. And that's what we say. The independent advisor has a view, of course, but the Prime Minister can take a view as well. And he can say, well, public scrutiny and transparency demands that we have a proper look at this and an investigation takes place. That's completely within his gift. It is to show some backbone and have a proper investigation. And then if it turns out that Rachel Reeves' story changes again, then I think her position is untenable.
But it's just an admin mess up, isn't it? Isn't that what it is? I mean, what would
Possibly.
what would an investigation achieve, do you think?
Well, if the investigation had happened on Wednesday, Rachel Reeves on Wednesday could have said, "Listen, I'm not sure what happened. Let's have an investigation. We'll look into all the information, and I'll provide you with the information." And that would have been different. But what she didn't do that. What she said on Wednesday said, "There's no case to answer. I wasn't aware. I'm putting it in place now. That's it." And then that story unravelled. That story was false. So I
But the
think at
story
that point in
did
time,
emerge but the letting agent said it wasn't their fault, it was our fault.
but the point is, Anna, that on Wednesday she said she wasn't aware. On Thursday she said she was aware, but it was the agent's fault. Her story has changed, and I think Rachel Reeves' problem here is her hypocrisy. In the past, when this has happened to other people and other parties, she's called for their resignation. We're not calling for that. We're calling for an investigation. I think it's perfectly in order that they should do that, and I think she'd be well advised to subject herself to a few more days of just making sure there's no other evidence that her story doesn't change again. That would be the right thing to do in our view. Then we can move on from this and make sure we get to a budget where hopefully Rachel Reeves doesn't whack the country with £70 billion a year of tax and spend. That's what she did last time. We think if she does that again, her position is untenable and she should resign. That's the more important of these issues.